About 50% of the workforce is military members.
Fantastic. Just for the audience, take a couple minutes. Tell us a little bit about you, your firm, whatever you want to share. You got the stage.
So I retired from the Marine Corps after 36 years. Did a lot of things, kind of the standard things you'd expect from the Marine Corps. But I was an intelligence officer, and we did a lot of work in cybersecurity, a lot of work in data, and I was the director of the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, whose remit was to help the Department of Defense get comfortable with artificial intelligence and figure out safe applications in defense for AI. And so it's a really fascinating journey. So had just a great opportunity to work through not just the technical implementation, but the ethics and the responsibility and the care that you have to take in implementation of artificial intelligence.
What does Academy Securities do specifically? Is it 100% artificial intelligence, or do you do banking for these deals? Or
No, it's a great question. So Academy Securities is actually a bond, primarily a bond firm, but they bring in a couple of folks like me, and we do geopolitical risk assessment for our customers, right? To help understand what's. I was the Joint Staff J2, for example, which is the intelligence advisor for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, when Gerald Dunford was the chairman. And there's a couple more like me who have technical chops, geopolitical chops, and we do geopolitical risk analysis then and technical risk analysis for our customers that are, in the bond space.
okay, so those are mostly private firms, I assume. We're not talking about government or
Private, publicly owned firms, yes.
So got it. Our next contestant, John Bailey. John, you're a pretty famous guy at Newport. I've been to Bailey Beach many times. I assume that has to do with you and your family, right? So, okay. John is the founder and CEO of Lumini Investments, a quantitative and AI investment manager. So tell us a little bit about your company, you importantly, because I love Bailey Beach. It's really a great place. Thank you for that, by the way. So.
Thank you. So hi, I'm John Bailey, and Lumini, we're an investment firm powered by quantitative and AI investment models. We work with family offices, investment advisors, asset managers, and hedge funds. We go to them, they tell us what their goals are, what they want to build from an investment perspective. We work with a team of data scientists that goes and trains and develops bespoke strategies for our clients. We show it to them. Everything's completely transparent and open. Client signs off on it. The AI issues the initial purchase recommendation provides, and then we go and implement the portfolio. And after that, for the investor, frankly, they have like a 95% reduction in the time they have to spend managing a portfolio. And we've also had a material decrease at the same time in the ability to produce alpha and to produce, the outcomes that investors want. So massive time savings, it's just a great efficiency boost. Performance has been better, and the risk monitoring and compliance is all of it. So the whole goal is just to make it simple and almost effortless to build better portfolios.
John, do you have your own platform that investors use, or do they call you and say, will you figure it out, give me a report? How does that work?
Yeah, they can tell us something fairly simple. They can tell us, give us their goals and be very, very specific. Like we got a hedge fund in New York that said we want to build a NASDAQ market neutral strategy. So we worked for 90 days with the CEO and the CIO, built everything out for them. They approved. But it can also be like just really simple. Something can say, I want a portfolio of like dividend stocks. So we'll work either way.
Cool. All right. Next contestant, Carmen. Lovely Carmen. The only beautiful woman on our panel. I didn't imagine that. Carmen Feliciano is the managing director of Access Ventures, and it's a global growth and venture firm. So tell us about you, your firm, and I'll ask the other specific questions.
Yeah.
Panelist number 3.
Yeah. Thank you, Gordon, and good afternoon to everyone here. So, as personal background, I grew up in the Philippines. That's also where I started my career. I was employee number 2 of a startup that successfully exited. to the largest telco. And that really started my passion for venture. So I moved to the US for my MBA at Wharton, and then spent the next few years in technology and innovation. So my experience includes advising clients like Samsung, Comcast. I handled P&L for a business unit at Nestle, and also briefly worked with the CFO on M&A. And then around 8 years ago, I transitioned to an investing role. I worked for a family office in the Philippines. At that time, we were also managing SoftBank's early stage fund for the country. And so given my personal experience and my network in both the US as well as in Asia, I co-founded Access Ventures with Mudit Dewar, who's actually here in the audience. So feel free to ask him questions after this panel. So Access Ventures, kind of given our background, is also from India. We are a cross-border investment firm. We focus on venture and growth. So we invest in companies Series B all the way to pre-IPO. We do both primary offerings as well as secondaries to access the best investment opportunities and technology. We're sector agnostic, but we're pretty active in enterprise SaaS and generative AI.
Fantastic. Salamat. One of the few words I know in Tagalog.
Yeah, that's very good.
We have an office in the Philippines, so I know words. I don't know the language, but I do know words. Most of them are not nice, but that's the employees doing that to me. Anyway, Carmen, do you accept retail accounts? Do you institutional base? Where's your money come from? And about how much do you have?
Yeah, so a lot of our LPs are family offices, but some of them do invest off the balance sheet from their enterprise. So a lot of our LP base are actually outside the US. So Asia, some in Europe and the Middle East. And it's really only this year that we started to have some families in the US invest.
Super. Thank you. Mark Jackson, how you doing?
How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. Most important is you. Okay, so panelist number 4. Quantinuum. Okay, close. It claims to be the world's largest integrated quantum computing company. Tell me about that. First of all, tell us about quantum computing. What's the difference between that and regular computing or supercomputing and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So it's great to be back here at Opal. So I've never before been on a panel where there were more people up here than down there. But it's wonderful to be back. So my personal background, I was a physics professor for most of my life. And then about 7 years ago, I started hearing about quantum computing, which the idea has been around for about 40 years. But it was only about 10 years ago that it started to be commercialized. And so I personally heard about it several years ago, and I was very lucky to be one of the first employees at a small British startup developing quantum software. And within a few years, we merged with the Honeywell quantum hardware team to form Quantinuum. So Quantinuum is only about 3 years old, but combined, it's about 10 years old. And we are the world's largest quantum computing company. For those of you who aren't quantum computing experts, so quantum computing is a completely different type of computing. It's not just a faster computer. It's a completely different type. It's only good for very specific problems. But the things that it's good at, it's very, very good at. And we expect that it will be able to solve problems that we never could have even hoped to have solved before. And I'll elaborate on that more later, but there are things like AI, machine learning, chemical simulations for pharmaceutical or material science applications, cybersecurity, both for good and for bad. You might have seen headlines about that. And we're actually very close to having some of these applications. A lot of times people seem to think we're decades away, that quantum is like science fiction, but we're actually very close to having.
So are you involved in the hardware side or the programming or both? Or
me personally, so I actually, so my job title is actually quantum evangelist, believe it or not, which I had mixed feelings for it at first, but I learned in Greek, evangelist means bringer of the good news. And so I actually do things just like this, getting people excited and aware about quantum computing.
So your firm, though, that you deploy capital to other people that are
so we build quantum computers and we build the software. So we're not a fund. We actually build.
That's your company.
And the software.
How many people work for it?
We have about 500 people now.
Wow. Okay, not a small shop. Now, just excuse my ignorance, is a quantum computer looks like a regular computer, or is there something special in it?
So right now, it depends on the technology. There are several different technologies you could use. You might have seen, they sort of look like golden chandeliers. You might, like in Marvel movies and stuff, that's kind of how they're drawn. And that is one type of technology called superconducting. We use a different technology called ion trap. It actually has lasers in it. It has kind of a vacuum chamber with lasers and such. We're working on making it much, much smaller. We expect within 10 years it'll be on a chip. So right now it's a small room, but within 10 years it'll be on the chip.
And I assume this has to be cooled, so
So with our technology, it helps to be cooled, but it's not essential. Whereas with those chandeliers, it is essential. That's actually a drawback because for portability, you can't very well carry liquid helium in a backpack. So that's one reason we're using that technology.
and are they power efficient, inefficient?
It's about 30,000 times more energy efficient than normal.
30,000.
30,000 times, yeah.
And it's 100 times faster, is that the?
Well, there's no theoretical limit to how much faster it could be. It's just a matter of the engineering of it. Like for example, if you wanted to figure out the molecular structure of penicillin, we know what the equations are, but it would require a normal computer about the size of the observable universe. So even theoretically, you would never be able to build a computer that large. Whereas with a quantum computer, we think we could do that in the next few years. And so that's why it's so amazing.
Wow. By the way, Mark, to answer your question about people, this is Newport. Cocktail hours at 5 o'clock. It was 4:57 when you asked that. And so people are looking at their watch saying, oh, this is Newport and cocktail hours in 3 hours. So what, 3 minutes. So this is the conundrum that we run into every now and then. But be that as it may, it's still Newport. Our last panelist, number 5, not the least, absolutely not. Igor, I don't want to butcher your last name, but it's Jaklokov?
Pretend the J is a Y.
Y. Yaklokov. All right, there we go. Founder and CEO of Priam, which is a leader in voice-driven technology. So for those of you who don't know a lot about voice, Alexa, if it wasn't for this man, Alexa wouldn't exist. So tell us a little bit about yourself, technology, maybe a little bit of quick history or something, because that's fascinating how things have.
Yeah, and I think when he's doing his introduction at 5 o'clock, it's not a conundrum, it's a paradox.
Yeah, paradox.
And a quantum evangelist brings you simultaneously good news and bad news. All right, so I actually started my career leading an advanced AI team at IBM, and we discovered Watson probably in 2002 timeframe onwards, and they didn't greenlight it. It was right there for the taking. So in my frustration, like Cartman from South Park, I said, screw you guys, I'm going home. And I picked off some of our top scientists and engineers, and I formed the last company. 5 years later, it was Amazon's first AI-related acquisition that birthed what all of you know as Alexa. So Alexa is my older sister's name, which is a coincidence, maybe, quantum entanglement. But the code name for it was Priam, and that's what we ended up using here. So 7 years ago, we decided to catch our own football. We knew that natural language experiences would come to more serious pursuits, critical infrastructure, academic institutions, government agencies, and the like, and we decided to start on our journey. I ended up meeting my first Series A investor. Most people didn't know that's what he was doing at the time. It was JD Vance. He was on my board for a couple of years. That turned into a turbulent week for me while I was at the Aspen Security Forum. And then we did end up getting the same group of investors that took the quantum computing division out of Google. So that's Jack's company, Sandbox AQ. And we're the AI behind things that you don't realize we're the AI behind, like all the strategic intelligence for World Economic Forum. We're the AI behind the scenes for NVIDIA, for Dell, and other brands as well.
Cool. For those of you who don't know, IBM had 2 main leaders. There was Tom Watson Sr. and Tom Watson Jr. And at one time, their supercomputer, I believe that was named, was Watson IBM. And okay, I don't want to date myself too much, but 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago, when I first started this business, it was like Watson IBM. Okay, and I remember that. So anyway, I want to ask the panel a philosophical question because I know, and by the way, if somebody in the audience has a burning question about AI, because it is an interesting subject, no matter how you look at it. But the philosophical question that comes up about this all the time is, who puts the boundaries on AI? In other words, we've let programmers do what they want to do. Is there any ethical challenge to this? Is there government interface that has to come? I mean, where does that capsule change from one to the next? Because there's always programming bias. In other words, if I'm a computer, which of course I'm not, and I wanted to program something, well, I may say, well, based on my beliefs, I want it to look a certain way. But with the blockchain now, when something's up, it's done and you can't take it off. And I mean, where are we going with this? I mean, is it for the good of everybody? Does it need to be regulated? Does it not need to be regulated? We'll start with the general over here.
So yes, it needs to be regulated, but we have to be careful not to regulate the value of right and flexibility. So this is something that a lot of governments and just look in the U.S. Congress has an AI strategy. The House has an AI strategy. The executive branch has a AI implementation strategy. The White House has a strategy. There's a national AI strategy coming out very soon. And so like we don't suffer from a lack of regulation right now. What we're trying to do is get the right regulation that ensures the safety and viability of the AI that's used across a whole bunch of different portfolios, and then figure out like, okay, how do we actually now build the capability? I think one of the things that is striking to me is artificial intelligence. It is transformational in the sense that it transforms, right? The form changes, transformed all of our operating processes. And I know we spend a lot of time talking about large language models and but the AI universe is so much bigger, and so much of the application space is very simple processes, right? Like we're talking about industrial processes making them better, drug discovery, making them faster. In defense, building situational awareness tools that that users can use. Like this is like the real sweet spot, the core of artificial intelligence. It's actually very simple, and it actually is being scaled already. So while we're kind of dithering about large language models and some of the foibles with large language models that we'll have to work through, artificial intelligence is operating in the background across almost every industry. And so that's something that's really important to understand. And then I think, and people talk about risk and artificial intelligence. And that's a fair conversation. But I will say this: the greatest risk for the United States and artificial intelligence is for us to fail to continue to lead in this space, so that we can draw the benefits of scaled artificial intelligence. And those benefits are, national security, competitiveness, industrial productivity. I mean, these are the things at scale that are going to help us pay our national debt and pay Social Security and continue to evolve, our societal goals. This is what's at risk when we talk about regulating AI to the point that we don't achieve those objectives. So it's really important that we have that broad perspective.
I think one of the things that people worry about, General Mike, is that I get this drone, I put AI in it, and it goes after the wrong guy. Oops. Is that a risk, or is that, fallacy? How does that play into things?
Yeah, so this is where like responsible application is really important, right? So we could talk for hours about this, but basically, artificial intelligence is a tool, especially in defense. You think about defense has lots of processes. Artificial intelligence is all about process, and in a process, in a military process, you spend a lot of time perfecting that process. So you know what to expect. You know what data is good. You know what data is bad, and so you build those processes for warfighting functions. And in the case that you just described, well, if you're targeting on based on a particular signature or something of vehicle or something like that. Well, it's important that you actually have the data, you actually train your algorithms completely, you actually have thought through what errors might be introduced. Like, it is really important that responsible users building applications are experts in the space that AI is going to operate, and then use that expertise to ensure the safe and responsible application of AI in all of the different use cases. It is not a plug it in and let it go, right? This is building a house. You have to be very careful every step of the way, and when you do, you can achieve enormous capabilities.
Thank you for that. Igor, in the same theme, but I got something more specific about you. Let's say I'm sitting at home in my living room and the kids next door are playing and they're throwing a soccer ball and it's hitting the side of my house and I'm getting mad. And so I say, Alexa, I want you to demon dial my neighbor every 30 seconds and play this recording. Control your children. Is this something that's real? How do you protect against things like that? Are there the boundaries that have to be drawn in programming, or where do we come up with the idea? And by the way, that's kind of a crazy thing, but maybe not. I mean, you don't know what people are going to do. Thoughts?
Yeah, holy smokes, there's a lot to cover there. So there's a saying in the South: a good country lawyer knows the law, a great country lawyer knows the judge. And so when you think about regulation, that's why I hired as head of government affairs the fellow that was privacy czar that negotiated a lot of the GDPR stuff with the Europeans, because all of that same personnel are now affecting AI regulation as well. That way we can help shape it so that there's freedom of action, but it's also designed in a responsible way. Look, on the European continent, you have both extremes. On one hand, people are saying, well, the Europeans are going to be constraining innovation, and Meta's and Apple are saying, well, we're not going to be able to deliver, some of these more advanced applications there as a result of it. But I also recently, came from the front lines of Ukraine. And there, I remember when we were traveling by armored car towards the front, I just started laughing. I literally was in the back seat with some MPs and I just started laughing. And they're like, what's so funny? I'm like, we're literally playing Russian roulette. It's completely random whether I got an A student or a C student of one of these technical universities, because based on the computer vision, because these drones are getting jammed in the last mile, they're deciding themselves whether to release munitions on targets using computer vision or not, and other sensors. So you're seeing both extremes there, where they really care about the social military use of these technologies, but then you're also seeing the tip of the spear use cases where these things are deciding these constructs for themselves. So yeah, it's strange. Now, what I see, for our industry, I'm seeing a lot of AI companies that are operating like criminal organizations in the US, right? Unfettered access to copyright issues, broadcasting that people should be using these technologies for mental health support and things of that sort. And that's why I think there's going to be a fallback position for what I call the adulting of AI. Those are the things that you're going to put in nuclear power plants and air bases and hospitals and things of that sort. And you're going to see, growth investors, that are focused more on enterprise AI, seeking those portfolio companies out, because they're not going to have, that risk element that you're seeing with a lot of consumer AI tools.
So with the bigger companies that are involved in this, I guess the court system is where they're going to end up in, and it's going to be party time for the lawyers.
They're going to get disrupted, right? Because they're all Titanics. They all think, oh my gosh, we're here, we're going to corner the market on this. And they're forgetting that they disrupted other folks. So there's going to be a new cadre of AI native companies, whether they're in defense on their commercial side, that will eventually sweep them away, and it won't take overnight. It's going to take a number of years for that to happen. Just like there's going to be quantum native companies that are going to be taking market over time as the technology gets more mature. That's a fact. We've seen it time and time again.
Mark, in your company, are there boundaries that you draw to your technology use, or is it, listen, that's up to the users and we're just facilitating how the speed works?
Yeah, so about 30 years ago, this very smart professor at MIT was was studying quantum computers. They hadn't been built yet, but he was thinking about them, and he found the algorithm for factoring numbers. And the reason this is important is because almost all types of encryption, that's right, Shor's algorithm, almost all types of encryption nowadays are based on the difficulty of factoring numbers. So he wrote down the recipe for how to defeat encryption using a quantum computer. Now, 30 years ago, no one really cared because they didn't exist. But now people really care. And governments and communications companies and financial firms are very concerned about this. The good news is there are defenses being developed against this. So for example, last fall, Signal, the messaging app, they implemented what's called post-quantum encryption. So they added a layer of encryption to protect against quantum hacking. In February, Apple did the same for iMessages. And a few weeks ago, Zoom did the same. So this is already being done. We've been using it without even knowing it. At our company, of course, we've come up with a way of producing what are called quantum secure keys for cryptography to help protect against hacking and such. And when people use our machine, we monitor everything they do. So we're very careful about this to make sure no one misuses it, because that is a potential misuse of quantum.
Carmen, in your quest for companies that you want to invest in, what are the parameters that you put on this? In other words, do you want to know from management exactly what the layout is, where they're going to spend their money, how they're going to spend it, what are they going to develop or not develop, and what are the borders that you're willing to invest, or is it just, well, build the technology? Thoughts?
To be candid, we don't go down to the level of, what are the parameters in terms of like their development. And to be honest, their technology could be, for example, we are investors in large language model companies, and it's still very much like early innings, how it will be applied. But I guess more to answer your broad question, your philosophical question, how kind of this can be regulated or how they can be controlled. I guess my answer to that is a very capitalist answer, in that, like, I do think the markets will regulate it. It's not going to be the politicians. I think they're going to be a bit behind. But people, especially in enterprises, they want AI that's safe. They want AI that's reliable. So the companies, whether it's OpenAI, they're incentivized to make sure that their AI can be used by the large, by everyone. Otherwise, people are not going to use their AI. And for example, Anthropic, their competitor, that was actually their selling point. Is that we're going to build like safe AI. So we think the markets will kind of rein in AIs going wild.
Tom was just asking me, what's your best idea in the space, and what are you looking for out of it?
I'm sorry?
What is your best idea in the space relative, or can you even talk about that?
Oh.
App or technology company, whatever you like.
So a specific company that we're excited about? Yeah, so I guess...
what are they doing? Just a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of a specific company, if you're following AI, I think the biggest winner right now is NVIDIA. 3 trillion market cap, 26 billion revenue, great gross margin, great margins. We're investing in a competitor, someone who has a decent shot at taking away some of that revenue. So if you look at compute, really what's powering AI, you really have CPUs and then GPUs, which were built more for gaming, and then you have the TPUs, which is from Google. So the founder of TPU started this company called Grok, and they're launching a language processing unit. And they just came out with their product early this year, but they're not an overnight success. They started the company in 2016, so they've been developing this for a long time. They're a incredible team, and their hardware is 10 times faster and 10 times cheaper than NVIDIA. So we think it's a great platform point.
Impressive. Okay, then you better watch it. By the way, the CEO is one of the nicest people of NVIDIA. I know I've watched this guy for a long time, back when his stock was $1, and he was in the video games. I'm like, I don't like video games, but now he's one of the wealthiest companies in the world. God bless him for that. John, as far as it's an interesting aspect that you guys bring in. I want to ask you about the philosophical, because you're catering to investors. when somebody says, I want to design a portfolio of whatever it is it granular to the point where it picks trades for me? Or is it pick managers, or does it do both? Or in other words, is it the world is my playing field?
Yeah, actually, since you put it that way, the world is kind of your playing field because there's like over 1 million combinations of what you sold. And you can build portfolios of managers, but you would say, why do that? You can build better portfolios that are cheaper and more transparent, just going straight, to securities. So individual stocks, bonds, credit, futures, currencies, things of that nature. So whatever your chances are, whatever your desire or your goals are, you can get a hyper custom solution for it.
You want to ask? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not human. You can't extrapolate immediately and come up with a conclusion. You can into a circumstance that's not programmed. Then you get to be what it doesn't have the data.
Yeah.
So I would view that as a weakness. Of how is that weakness dealt with? It generates
Sure, yeah, let him answer first.
Outside of this. So, yeah, I'm going to repeat it. Okay, so what this young man next to me has said is that he's interested in what are the limitations that you have with AI, because in theory, it can't know everything yet. So how do you take into consideration perhaps the human factor versus the AI factor, and then come up with a portfolio strategy that you're pretty certain about however that's going to be?
Well, I'll start by saying one thing we believe in very strongly is, AI and investing is not just meant to be like this black box that you set off on your own and you just let it run. We think it's critically important that you have people and then the AI together working in tandem. And the AI is a tool for the humans to make them better. So when you talk about people, that's the first thing. But we are getting, you're receiving trade recommendations by this sell that, and we'll follow that process. We won't go in, for example, I'm not sure if this is what you're asking. We won't go in, for example, and say, well, the human says, I feel nervous about interest rates, so I'm going to not do bonds or something like that. We think that's defeating the purpose. So humans and AI are better together. That said, the humans basically gave all of the goals. And if you think of like building a house, they were like the architects of the house, so they came up with all the goals. But the AI is executing the strategy, so let it execute on your behalf. We think it'll do much better than a human would. Yeah. Well, it kind of does in a way. It does make this. It'll make probabilistic decisions, right? So it's not just saying, black or white. It's looking at the probabilities, and it's also calculating things where, to make a change, the benefit is minimal. It'll kick those out, right? So it's got to be material change and material improvement. But to go back to your question about limitations, there are limitations. So what are some of the limitations, and then also, an example of how it handled it. So one of the limitations is if you're coming across an environment. So we're doing pattern recognition all the time. Massive amounts of data is coming in. We're running pattern recognition across market securities, indicators, sentiment, et cetera, all every day, looking at all the correlations between them. So it's a big pool of data there. So they're doing that every day. But if you're finding today's pattern doesn't really have a strong outcome from prior patterns. So let's say you don't have that many patterns similar today, number one. Number two, maybe one's positive, one's negative, right? So the outcome is kind of, cloudy. So what it'll do then on that day, let's say that day is Wednesday, what it'll do on Wednesday is it'll just pull the current portfolio. It realizes it's not quite getting the pattern, and then tomorrow it starts again. And then, so yes, when you're having a brand new pattern, it may take a while before it starts to catch on and learn, because it's learning. So it's even learning from the new pattern. And I'll give you a perfect example, COVID. Like the machine, I saw it live, it had no idea what COVID was, but it basically recognized COVID as like a risk event. So even though it wasn't programmed for COVID, it figured it out. Oh, this is like a negative thing, and these are the things that do better during that environment. So it went for like cash and gold and bonds and things of that. So even though it may not be programmed for something, it's learning along the way and it's adapting. And it's doing that on a Wednesday, and on Thursday it's redoing it again. So it's always trimming and kind of optimizing.
Yeah, I'm going to ask specifically if you would, if you two could go offline in the back afterwards so that you can go into more depth because you have a lot. Well, that was no, but I think this gentleman wants to really absorb all the things that you have. And we don't have enough time for it, but I would encourage you to have a meeting about it. Is there anybody else with a great question? This gentleman here? It's okay. Just, you can say what the question is.
I'll bring you a mic. Question is directed to Igor and Mark predominantly, but obviously anybody else, please feel free to take it. Machine learning, NLP, we could trace it back several decades, 1940s, 50s, 60s. The research paper in 2017, attention is all you need, led to transformer architecture, which is why we're seeing the ChatGPTs of the world. What, in your view, is the next disruption from the transformer architecture? Do we move away from that? If so, how and when?
Yeah, there's a fundamental defect in it. I remember meeting Scaramucci at Davos and speaking at his event in Wall Street. And he said, how do you guardrail these large language models? And I'm like, Mooch, you can't. Sort of like you trying to keep Donald Trump on a teleprompter. So there's fundamental flaws in it where you're not going to use it for some of the more serious things. I just wrote a piece in UBS Family Office Quarterly, co-authored with the first chief of lessons learned at CIA. And it basically said family offices need to become intelligence agencies for the use of AI. Because as you're tending to your portfolios, you better see the risks and opportunities before others do, right? Because there's new funds that are getting sprung up that are using AI to look for defects in businesses in order to start shorting them or other adverse things. What's a perfect example of it? Well, look at asymmetric power. You had one person asking a question about interest rate risk with Silicon Valley Bank, and that almost caused a chain reaction that was going to blow out all your, the majority of your startups, the majority of your venture capital investments as well. And so across the Fortune 500, AI from an economic warfare perspective is going to be essentially finding these Madoff-like issues in all of these organizations. And so you've got to get to that first as fiduciaries before it does. But to your point about the technologies, yeah, the fundamental problem with ChatGPT and NLP is turning the cow into a hamburger.
Thank you, Igor. Again, I want to encourage people to be able to go in the back of the room and after the meeting. We have time for one more question. This gentleman over here.
So the speed's going to go up. The energy is going to go down. We're going to live in a world where there's just an exponential ability to do things. What is going to protect us against others using quantum computing to break every passcode, every encryption, every available form of security?
Yes, yeah, one step ahead.
I love how that was so implicitly directed at me. So I was personally responsible.
Well, you're making it faster.
Yeah. No. So that absolutely would happen if it were unchecked. But as I alluded to earlier, there are protections against hacking from quantum computing, and they've been developing in the past years, and they're already starting to be implemented. So I mentioned like Signal, Apple, Zoom are already starting to do this. Many governments are starting to require these what are called post-quantum encryption implementations. A lot of companies will just want to do it anyway. There's one of the motivations for doing it today is because there are rumors that certain governments in the world are archiving information today so that in a few years when quantum technologies get better, they'll be able to decrypt things. So there actually is a lot of urgency right now. People are starting to do it. So it's true, you should be aware of this, but people are taking precautions against it.
So Mark, is this sort of like mine is bigger and faster than yours and oh well, okay, yeah, I get it. for everybody in the audience, and I'm going to suggest this, normally, if you wanted to speak to any of these people, it may not be free. It is free here. So by all means, take advantage of it, because otherwise you may get a bill later. So please, thank you by hand to the audience for their, and also for our panelists.